Well, where does this plan leave humanitarian efforts on the ground? It is another immediate crisis. The aid agency MSF was on the programme this time yesterday, warning that the apocalyptic situation on the ground now would get immeasurably worse if this plan were to go ahead. Let's speak now to an American doctor, Mark Brunner, who recently returned from the NASA hospital in Gaza. And Mark, thank you so much for being here with us on BBC News. I wonder if you could just start by describing the levels of starvation you saw all around you when you were there just a few weeks ago.
Absolutely. The level of starvation is just catastrophic. It's clear to anyone observing the people, even President Trump can see from the photos, people are absolutely skeletal. Their clothes just hang off their frame. People are delirious. They are stumbling, they're passing out, and it is pervasive and systemic everywhere you look. And the global acute malnutrition scores that have been used are severe underestimates. The severe acute malnutrition level for children age less than 5, for example, the people that are the most at risk is estimated to be approximately 5%, but that estimate is probably, so far under. It's probably more like 10, and these children are at a direct life threat.
Well,
so they need.
Let me ask you about that, because I quoted you a couple of times in interviews last week after I read some of your accounts, and you described the impacts of extreme malnutrition, extended starvation, and what that does to the human body, the gut. I wonder if you would just describe that for people watching you speak now.
Sure. These children already have experienced multi-trauma. And what is even worse is that it is so pervasive in how it affects the physiology that they start to lose emotional contact even with their families. So they become delirious. They have hallucinations. They are unable to sleep. They get zero REM. They essentially become almost like zombies. They stop playing. They stop talking. They stop looking for love. They lose contact completely with their family. And it's really an incredible insult to injury. But, it starts with the brain and starts to kind of goes down. But in the most severe forms, especially in children that are less than 6 months of age, you start to get an obliteration of the immune system, because people don't really start to develop a fully robust immune system until approximately 6 months of age. And so what happens is that they start getting infections of every type that you can imagine, skin infections, because everybody has cuts and scrapes. The body starts having severe protein and carbohydrate malnutrition and loss, where there's not enough protein circulating in the blood to keep the water in the bloodstream. So the water goes to area of least resistance, which is the gut. So the gut becomes very distended. And then what happens there is that the gut lining starts to auto-digest. And then the bacteria, the E. coli that are in the gut, start to translocate or move across the barrier from inside the gut into the bloodstream. And then you have what's called gram-negative sepsis, which is a systemic infection that is pretty much 100% lethal.
It is, it is horrific to hear you describe all of that. When you get to a tipping point like that, is there any way back from that?
Unfortunately, there's really not. And that's the problem. There are literally thousands of children that have crossed the tipping point where we won't know the total mortality and morbidity numbers for months. But even with refeeding in an ICU environment where you can monitor blood electrolyte levels several times a day under extremely controlled conditions, there's still very high lethality. And so, the issue is too is that the underestimation, and a really terrible part of this story is that, you know, the numbers that we have are from people who are still able to get up and walk and move around. There are so many people that are so destroyed that they're just lying in their tents.
Yes.
So, you know, they're completely isolated and we have no idea about them. And so these numbers are just going to climb so high.
A really brief thought, if you would, as a final thought, because I know you as doctors try to get baby formula into Gaza. Just briefly, tell me what happened there.
Well, when we were at Nasser, we occasionally would need to go over to the children's hospital adjacent to Nasser. And while we were there, it was overwhelming. There were 100 children that were at high risk of imminent death from starvation that needed specialized formula. And they are living day to day, hour by hour, waiting for small amounts of food to come in. People that basically smuggle specialized formula in because the Israeli Defense Force has, you know, explicitly and intentionally blocked baby formula. The crew that came in right behind us, we asked them to bring in formula. The IDF stopped them at the border and took all of the formula out of their bags. But there are thousands of children in very close proximity to the hospital because the hospital itself is overwhelmed, and these children are at risk of death. And the families just essentially hunker down in buildings, blown up buildings around the hospital to come in under emergent conditions because there's no room in the hospital. And this is a red zone, so they're living in a red zone in close proximity to the hospital so they can jump in quickly at the last second. But generally, there's nothing that can be done.
Doctor, we have to leave it there, but we are very grateful for your time, for speaking to us here on BBC News. Thank you.